My name is Elena Carter, and for as long as I can remember, I believed that loyalty was the strongest thread in any friendship. I believed that when someone called you a sister, when someone promised you their trust, they meant it. I was naive. I didn't realize that sometimes the people who smile the widest at you are the ones sharpening the knife behind your back. For me, that person was Sophie Miller, my best friend since college. At least that's what I thought she was. She called me her rock, her confidante, her sister. She was at my side at my wedding, and I stood next to her at hers. We shared secrets, heartbreaks, and dreams over midnight phone calls and too many cups of coffee. I thought I knew her heart, but the truth was, I only knew the mask she wore. The night my life split in two started like any other gathering. Sophie had organized a small dinner at our house, inviting a few close friends from our old college group. Her home was warm and elegant, just like her, candles flickering across polished wooden tables, wine glasses catching the dim golden light. I walked in with my husband, Michael, feeling comforted by familiar faces and laughter. But as the night went on, I noticed something strange. Every time I spoke, Sophie would cut me off with a little joke, a dismissive wave, or a sly comment that made everyone laugh, not with me, but at me. Elena, you always exaggerate, she said, smirking when I shared a story about my new project at work. Don't mind her, guys. She thinks she's running the world now. Laughter filled the table, but it wasn't the warm kind. It was sharp mocking. I forced a smile, though I felt my cheeks burning. Later, when I mentioned how hard Michael and I had been working to save for our dream home, Sophie tilted her glass toward me and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, oh, please, Elena, don't act like you're struggling. You're always trying to make yourself sound like some underdog hero. We all know you're not as successful as you pretend to be. The table went quiet for a moment, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Then someone chuckled nervously. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. I glanced at Michael, who squeezed my hand under the table, but the sting of betrayal was already burrowing deep. Sophie's eyes met mine, and there was something there I hadn't seen before. Not friendship, not affection, but triumph. Like she enjoyed watching me squirm. It didn't end there. Throughout the night, she sprinkled more little jabs, carefully disguised as jokes. Elena's always so dramatic, aren't you? If I had $1 for every time Elena bragged about something, I'd be rich. Careful, Michael or Elena will write a whole speech about how hard her life is. Each one landed like a dagger. By the end of dinner, my chest was tight, my throat dry from forcing fake laughter. When we finally left, Michael asked quietly in the car, are you okay? I swallowed hard, my eyes fixed on the blur of streetlights outside the window. She's supposed to be my best friend. Why would she humiliate me like that? Michael sighed, his grip tightening on the wheel. Because maybe she was never really your friend. Those words rattled in my bones. I didn't want to believe them. I couldn't. Sophie was my best friend. She had to be. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted, and in the days that followed, it grew. Because I started noticing things I hadn't before, whispers, rumors, cold stares from people I barely knew but who seemed to know something about me. I didn't understand it yet, but I was about to. The night at Sophie's house wasn't just casual cruelty. It was the first strike in a much bigger betrayal, one that would unravel everything I thought I knew about friendship, loyalty, and love. And it was the moment that began my journey from silent suffering to devastating revenge. I wasn't born with the kind of confidence that makes people listen when you enter a room. I built mine slowly, with splinters and bandages, over years of proving to myself that I could do hard things. Maybe that's why Sophie found me interesting in the first place, because I was earnest, uncomplicated, the sort of person who thought friendship was a shelter rather than a contest. I met Sophie Miller during freshman orientation when the college gym echoed with the shrieks of 80 girls, searching for their name tags like their identities depended on it. I had the sort of name tag that slid to the floor twice before I finally pinned it on right. She had the kind that stayed put on the first try. Hey, Elena, right? She'd said, tilting her head. You're an intro to media ethics. I nodded, hugging my folder like a life raft.
Yeah.
And journalism 101. Oh, it's all a little overwhelming. She grinned. Her teeth were perfect. Stick with me. I've got a map for everything. She wasn't wrong. Sophie always had a map. She knew which professor would be lenient about late papers, which cafe refilled coffee for free, which dorm RA would ignore midnight singing if you invited her to join. She moved through the world as if she had received instructions the rest of us weren't given. I didn't understand then that those maps came with a price. We fell into a rhythm quickly, study sessions that turned into gossip, shared notes that turned into shared clothes, nights spent planning futures bigger than our borrowed dorm room posters. I liked the way Sophie talked about success, like it was a door you knocked on hard enough and eventually it opened. I liked that she believed in me as if belief itself were currency. On the third week of classes, she leaned across the library table and whispered, you're kind of brilliant. I laughed, embarrassed. Stop. I'm serious, Elena. The way you dissect stories, you can see the angles. You're going to be an incredible investigative reporter one day. And no one had ever said something like that to me. My parents, Maria and Thomas, loved me in quiet, practical ways, packed lunches, advice that smelled like laundry soap. Do your best, my mother would say, smoothing the hair from my forehead. We weren't a family that boasted. We were a family that paid bills on time and checked the stove twice. Hearing Sophie say I was brilliant lit a small candle inside me. We didn't talk much about money, but I saw it anyway. The way her phone screen flashed a car service at 2 a.m., because walking is a vibe until it's not. The offhand way she replaced a blazer because a sleeve snagged. I saved tips from my campus cafe job in a washed out jar and rationed my printer credits like oxygen. It wasn't resentment. It was awareness. She was champagne. I was drip coffee. We laughed at the difference. She started dating Ryan, a lacrosse boy with a laugh that sounded like a golden retriever shaking off water. Our sophomore year. He was loud and loyal in that collegiate way, and he slid naturally into our orbit, bringing with him a constellation of friends who liked to talk too loudly about internships they hadn't earned yet. I didn't dislike Ryan. I just didn't see what he and Sophie talked about when the music got quiet. Stop squinting like that, she teased one night, catching me watching them at a party. You're gonna wrinkle. I'm not squinting, I said, then softened. Do you love him? Who knows, she said breezily. He's good company and he opens doors. Sometimes that's what you need when you're building a life, Elena. Doors. She sipped her drink. Don't look at me like that. It's not a sin to want things. I want things too, I said. She touched my arm. I know. That's why I keep you around. I thought she meant it like a joke. I would learn slowly that Sophie's jokes were often truths dressed in comedy. By junior year, my world had begun to take shape. I landed a semester internship at a local investigative bureau, the kind of place that smelled like old coffee and older paper, the kind of place where you learned how a detail could change a life. I wrote a piece about a landlord who ignored mold complaints in a low-income apartment building, and the story ran on the school site. It was small, it was everything. When I told Sophie, her eyes went bright. See, she said, hugging me. I told you, brilliant. Then, casually, you should let me look over your grad fellowship app. You have the heart, but I can clean up the edges. I was grateful. I sent her my application, a carefully built argument of my past and my purpose, and she sent it back with peppered comments that stung. This paragraph is performative. Tone down the trauma. You're not the hero. The truth is. But I took her notes, trusting the map. When the application was rejected, I tried to be stoic. Maybe next year, I said into my pillow, embarrassed by the tears that would not be reasoned with. Bureaucracy, she said, rolling her eyes. They probably already had their darlings. It's not on you. I believed her. I didn't see then the line she had struck through a crucial anecdote that connected my work to that building's legal follow-up, an edit she claimed was grandstanding, but which, in retrospect, had been the spine of the narrative. I didn't see that my voice, earnest particular, was something she felt compelled to sand down. Other moments should have warned me. A pitch meeting where I thought I heard my idea tumble out of her mouth with different adjectives. A professor who congratulated her on a phrase I knew I'd type. A party where she introduced me as the friend who keeps me grounded, like I was an anchor dragging behind her boat. At my wedding, years later after college, after first jobs, after I met Michael in a newsroom where the printers were always a little too loud and the vending machine always a little too empty, Sophie stood beside me in blue satin and delivered a toast that made the room erupt with laughter. I smiled like a good friend. I smiled even when she said, Elena is the kind of woman who will talk about doing something for 2 years and then quietly do it in 2 days. She's relentless. She's a little exhausting, but she's the reason we all double check our sources and our hearts. Afterward, Michael squeezed my hand in the way that meant he was listening for the thing beneath the words. It's fine, I said, heat rising to my face. It's just her humor. It was pointed, he said. It's how she is, I repeated, as if repetition could turn a knife into a spoon. Looking back, the history of our friendship is speckled with these tiny betrayals I explained away. When we moved into our first apartment, she borrowed my black blazer for an interview with a magazine, where she would later sigh loudly about nepotism hires, even as she accepted an offer from an editor whose brother had coached Ryan's lacrosse team. When I landed my first front page story, she posted a photo of us with a caption that read, "So proud of my bestie for finally catching up. Now it's my turn to nap while she runs the world." I told myself I was lucky to have a friend who kept me humble. Isn't that what we tell ourselves when we're afraid to look at the truth? My parents loved Sophie, of course. Everyone did. She was the kind of person who showed up with flowers when you got a speeding ticket and a spreadsheet when you were planning a move. My mother called her, or second daughter, and packed her Tupperware after dinners, telling me quietly, "Isn't it nice to see you with such a good friend? Women need women." Oh, we do. That's part of what made the betrayal feel like the ground shifting under a familiar house. The older we got, the more professional our worlds became, the more those invisible lines deepened. I built my career in patient layers, small stories that became bigger ones, a reputation that earned trust. Michael and I learned how to be married the way you learn a language, with mistakes and listening and deliberate softness. We saved what we could, paid what we had to, and dreamed about a house with a lemon tree. Sophie, meanwhile, rebranded her MAP as a consultancy, advising fledgling lifestyle brands on narrative positioning, which meant she told them how to look aspirational without looking out of touch. She was good at it. She also started a podcast where she interviewed entrepreneurs about mindset versus method, and it took off because she knew how to make ambition sound like therapy. I don't begrudge her any of that. I begrudge the way she started to define me publicly as the cautionary tale beside her hustle. Some people work hard and wait for the world to notice, she said in one episode. Some people make the world notice. You can guess which one I am. Then she laughed, and her co host said, "Like your friend who says she's overwhelmed for 3 months and then files a masterpiece." And Sophie said, "Exactly, my sweet Elena. She needs me to nudge her." The listeners laughed. They didn't know my name. They knew me as a type. I told myself it was a character, a convenient shorthand for a story. I didn't hear what was under it. She needs me. Do you want to know when I first felt something curdle? It was at a brunch where giant white peonies drooped toward plates of soft scrambled eggs. Our college group gathered twice a year, a ritual that had survived marriages, babies, job changes, and relocations. Priya, who now ran a nonprofit that bullied city councils into fixing things. Jordan, who wrote documentaries strong enough to make politicians flinch. Naomi, who taught high school with a fierceness that could split the sky. Sophie, who was still the center because she knew how to hold attention like a bouquet. I was telling a story about a recent investigation. It's still ongoing, but we might have finally gotten the lead we needed. When Sophie interrupted, smiling. "Elena, don't be coy," she said. "She's been buried in this for months. So everyone please clap because I haven't seen her outside in daylight since January." I laughed. "That's dramatic." Also, "It's June. Time is fake," she said, and they laughed. And then she added lightly, "Honestly, I think she just likes the martyr aesthetic. She'll take on 3 jobs and then act surprised when she's tired." A Naomi's smile faltered. "Hey, that's not fair. It's a joke," Sophie said, holding up her hands. "Relax. Did you guys see the meme about?" But the moment had snapped, and I felt it like a draft. Later, Priya squeezed my shoulder while we waited for coffee. "She does that a lot," she said softly. Makes it sound like she built you." "She's teasing." I insisted, hearing the defensiveness razor my voice. "We've always teased." Priya looked at me with the kind of compassion that makes you want to cry and shout. "Okay," she said carefully. "Just watch it." I didn't want to watch it. Watching would mean naming it. Naming it would mean deciding what to do. Around that time, Michael and I started seriously house hunting. It felt both impossible and necessary. The city's prices were absurd, but renting felt like living in an airport, temporary, controlled by schedules you couldn't see. We made a budget. We ran numbers at the kitchen table. We toured places that smelled like fresh paint and possibility. I told Sophie about a little blue place we loved, tiny backyard, creaky floors, but a window in the kitchen that turned the sink into a prayer. I mean, she said, you should be realistic. It's small. Don't you want something that fits your lifestyle when you have kids? It fits our budget, I said, and it feels like us. I just don't want you to settle, she said, teeth flashing. You deserve the big thing. And besides, there are other options. Other options, I frowned. Like what? She waved it off. Later, I've got a call. Like what? Sophie. The question stuck in my throat, then slid away. She was already tapping her screen, already gone. We didn't buy the blue house. It sold to someone else for more than asking, and I told myself it was fate, not defeat. When Sophie and Ryan upgraded from their starter condo to a 3-story townhome with a roof deck, she texted me a photo of a sunset reflected in a glass of white wine. Come over, she wrote. We'll christen the place with bad pizza and better gossip. We christened. We let the view do what views do, make you feel like the world has layers you can climb. Soon, Michael murmured in my ear when we got home. We'll have our place soon. I nodded, resting my head on his shoulder. I loved him most in these quiet declarations. No extravagant promises, just sturdy hope. Another small thing I should have seen. The night I was up against a brutal deadline, the kind where your spine hurts and even your hair feels tired. Sophie popped by, just to say hey, and ended up staying, legs folded on my couch, scrolling through her phone while I typed. When I finally hit send, she lifted her head. You look like you ran a marathon, she said gently, then smiled. Want me to post about your article? I could boost it. People love a behind the scenes girl boss vibe. The word made me wince. No, let's let the peace be the peace, she pouted. I'm trying to help you? I know, I said and thanked her and changed the subject. What I wanted to say was I don't want to be a character in your feed. I don't want my work to be a prop that makes your platform look generous. She always brought me little gifts, face masks, a book she thought I'd love, a candle that smelled like cedar and safety, and I accepted them because refusing kindness felt churlish. Later, I realized kindness is sometimes currency, and you can end up paying interest you never agreed to. When her consultancy hit a rough patch, she cried on my couch, makeup streaking onto my throw pillow, whispering, I don't know who I am if I'm not winning. You are you, I told her, stroking her hair back. Your work is not your worth. She hiccuped a laugh. Says the woman who literally married her work? Stop, I said, smiling so she would see the softness. You're allowed to rest. I lent her money then, a small loan to bridge a bad quarter. We didn't make a big deal of it. You're my family, I said. We don't keep score? I'd die for you, she said, holding my hands. I wouldn't be me without you. It should have felt like grace. It felt like a knot, the night of the dinner, the one where the jokes had edges sharp enough to slice. The knot tightened, and in the days afterward, the whispers thickened into a fog I couldn't ignore. A colleague pulled me aside. A weird question, he said, lowering his voice. He's everything okay at home? Someone said? Never mind. Forget it. What did someone say? I demanded, heart sprinting. He flushed. It's probably dumb. I just heard that you and Michael are having money problems. That you're drowning. That you talk about moving because you can't keep up. I told them they didn't know you, but who told you? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. He hesitated. It came through friends of friends. One of them follows Sophie's podcast. She's pretty open about, personal stories. I felt cold, like the truth had been left in a freezer and I'd swallowed it whole. What personal stories? He looked pained. She didn't use names. She just said she has a friend who dramatizes struggle to make achievements look heroic, and that sometimes people create scarcity to make themselves feel special. And look, I'm sure she didn't mean you, but she did. At the farmer's market, a woman I recognized from Sophie's circle hugged me in that fake way, upper bodies far apart, perfume first. Elena! How are you, sweetie? I heard you're being so brave about the house stuff. You always land on your feet, I swear. I went home and stared at the lemon I'd bought, its skin bright and furious. Michael found me still in my coat, holding the lemon like a talisman. He said softly, talk to me. She's telling people I'm a liar, I whispered. She's telling people I pretend to struggle, that I need her. Michael's jaw tightened. We need to set a boundary. What boundary do you set with someone you regard as your sister? I asked, voice breaking. How do you draw a line through a person who has sat on your bathroom floor while you cried? Who knows the names of your childhood dolls? Who has a key? You change the locks, he said simply. And then you decide who gets the new key? I wanted to be brave. I wanted to call Sophie and say, "What are you doing? Why are you trying to narrate my life like I'm your subplot?" But when I dialed, the call went to voicemail. I left a small, careful message. Can we talk? I feel like there's a misunderstanding. She texted back an hour later, meeting spiral, call you to move. Love you? Tomorrow stretched into next week. Meanwhile, my group chat lit up with screenshots I didn't want to see, clips from her podcast where she described a friend whose victim complex makes her impossible to help, Instagram stories that alluded to friends who don't clap unless they're in the photo, captions under sunset pictures that murmured, "Find the people who don't drain you." Her followers commented with heart emojis and preach and boundaries. And I scrolled through them with a stomach that felt like sand. Priya called. "I'm not sending these to hurt you," she said. You should know what she's doing." What am I supposed to do? I asked, hating the wobble. Confront her in public. Post my own essay titled "My Best Friend is a Liar"? Maybe not public, Priya said, but don't pretend you don't see it. I couldn't sleep. I watched the ceiling until it was almost dawn, and I thought about the maps Sophie always had, how she knew which door to knock on, which phrase to deploy, which tear to cry. I thought about how often she'd told me who I was. I thought about how easy I had made it, handing her drafts of my life and asking for her edits. The next afternoon, I walked to the coffee shop we always used as a midpoint. I ordered 2 lattes. I sat and waited. When she arrived, the room changed shape, as it always did. She drew focus like a magnet finds metal. "L," she said, "Daisy, bright. Sorry I'm late. Crisis averted. What's up? Are you okay? You sounded weird." "I'm not okay," I said quietly, surprised by the steady calm in my voice. "You're bleeding me in public." Her smile didn't falter. "What does that mean?" "You're telling stories about me," I said. "You're painting me as a nuisance, as a drama queen, as someone who," she laughed. "Oh my God, Elena, not everything is about you. It is when you call me your best friend and then build content out of my life." I leaned forward. "You don't get to call me family and then brand me as your charity case." Her eyes flashed before her expression smoothed. "I never said your name." "You didn't have to," I said. "You left the breadcrumb trail. And you know what? Even if no one knew I knew, that's enough." She stirred her coffee as if the sugar required extraordinary concentration. "I'm allowed to talk about my experiences. You're not allowed to rewrite mine." Something mean shadowed her gaze. "You know what your problem is. You're as addicted to feeling wronged as I am to fixing things. I hold up a mirror and you hate the reflection." "I don't hate reflections," I said. "I hate masks." We stared at each other. A couple at the next table whispered. The barista called a name that wasn't mine. "I love you," she said finally, in the tone she used when she wanted to reframe a scene. "I want the best for you. I'm sorry if you feel exposed. That was never my intention." I should have asked then, what was your intention? But I knew. The intention was control cloaked in care, editorial authority dressed as friendship. The intention was to be the narrator of every room she entered. She stood, squeezed my hand, and said, "Dinner Friday. Everyone's coming. Let's reset." I said yes because the old scripts are hard to abandon, and because I wanted to believe love could be louder than humiliation. Friday was the dinner where the jokes cut. Friday was the night the knot cinched closed. And then came the smoke, a rumor that I'd claimed credit for a colleague's lead cell untrue, that Michael and I were performing middle class, while actually loaded from family money. See, astonishingly untrue. My father managed an auto parts store and my mother worked at a clinic. That I had method acted poverty because it made my reporting more compelling. I found screenshots of DMs sent by anonymous accounts to acquaintances I barely knew. "Just watch out. Elena tends to use people." Ask around. Ask around where? Around Sophie's orbit, where she was the sun. When I called her again, she didn't pick up. She texted, "Busy, busy." "Can we not do drama this week? I need calm." "Are you doing this?" I wrote back, hands trembling. "Doing what?" She replied, "Baby, the world does what it does. Focus on your marriage. Go to yoga." Michael took my phone gently. "We're done texting her," he said. "It's time to be strategic." What does that mean? I asked, wiping my cheeks with the heel of my hand. It means, he said carefully, we treat this like what it is, a reputational attack. We gather proof, we set boundaries, and we build a plan that is equal parts truth and consequence. Consequence? I repeated, tasting the word. It didn't feel like vengeance, not yet. It felt like oxygen returning to my lungs. That weekend, I opened old folders. I made lists of things that had felt wrong, and then I found receipts, emails, drafts, time-stamped messages, edits that were not suggestions, but erasures. I called Priya. I called Jordan. I asked them to be honest. She has always wanted to be your publicist. Jordan said, sighing, except she never asked your permission for the job. She's been collecting your stories, Priya said. Maybe because she's afraid you'll collect hers. Why? I asked, my voice small and furious. Priya paused. I think she needs to be needed, and you started needing her less. I stared at the lemon tree I'd placed on our windowsill, a tiny plastic tag assuring me that with enough light it would bear fruit. I thought friendship was a place you go to rest. It is, Priya said softly. But she turned it into a stage. The backstory of a betrayal is always this 100 little cuts you call paper, until you look down and realize you are bleeding. Our history was a mixture of tenderness and threat, of her hands handing me tissues, and her voice telling crowds who I was. She called me her sister. Maybe she thought siblings forgive without question. Maybe she mistook my loyalty for silence. But something inside me had shifted from plea to plan. The girl who needed a map remembered that she had learned to draw her own. I'm done explaining it away, I told Michael that night, my voice steady. I'm done being edited in rooms I don't enter. He nodded, eyes soft with pride. Then we start. Quietly? How? I asked, and there was a new, electric feeling curling through my ribs. Fear and relief. Grief and grit? First, he said, we find the source of the smoke. Then we turn on the lights. Then, I whispered. Then we make sure everyone sees who wrote the script. In the soft dark of our living room, I let the truth settle. Sophie hadn't saved me. She had curated me. She had been building her own mythology on the scaffolding of my life, and every time I stepped off, she had tugged me back with humor, with history, with love you, baby, and don't be dramatic. She had wanted me humble, grateful, edited, and I had let her. Not anymore. I thought of the girl with the name tag that wouldn't stay on. I thought of the woman who had taught herself to pin it, then to stitch it, then to embroider it into her collar so no one could remove it. Consequence. I said again, tasting it like a new language that already knew me. Okay. If the hook was humiliation, the backstory was the map. And I was done letting someone else draw it. By then, Sophie wasn't just my best friend. She had become my narrator, shaping how others saw me before I could even open my mouth. And the more I tried to ignore it, the more powerful her voice became. It started small, like a whisper in the background, a comment here, a sly laugh there. But then Sophie's words began to multiply, sprouting into full-blown rumors that crawled into every corner of my life. The first sign came at work. I had just wrapped up an investigation into a shady developer who was evicting families illegally. It was one of the biggest stories I'd ever worked on, and I was proud. When it went live, the article got traction, not just local but national. My editor shook my hand, telling me it was the kind of piece that put a reporter on the map. But the very next day, I walked into the newsroom to find colleagues whispering behind their screens. One of them, a kind young intern named Hannah, came up to me hesitantly. Elena, she said softly. Can I ask you something? Did Sophie really help you with the article? I blinked, taken off guard. Help me? No, of course not. Why? She looked uncomfortable. I listened to her podcast last night. She was talking about how one of her closest friends just had this big breakthrough, but wouldn't admit how much of it was influenced. She said sometimes people take credit for other people's insights. I froze. The room tilted slightly. Hannah shifted, lowering her voice. She didn't use your name, but it was kind of obvious. A heat flushed through me. That's not true. Not even close? I know, Hannah said quickly. I believe you. I just thought you should know what's out there. When she walked away, I sat down at my desk, my fingers trembling over the keyboard. My pride in the article evaporated, replaced by anger and shame. Sophie had managed to twist even my greatest achievement into a question mark. She hadn't just humiliated me at dinner. Now she was actively undermining me in my career. I told myself it couldn't get worse. But it did. 2 weeks later, Michael came home looking unsettled. He tossed his keys into the bowl by the door and sat heavily on the couch. Elena, he said slowly, did you tell Sophie about the loan we applied for? My stomach dropped. No. Why? Because one of my coworkers just asked if everything was okay with us financially. He said he heard through a friend of a friend that we were drowning in debt. I felt the blood drain from my face. Debt? We're not even Michael, we're fine. We've been careful, he said gently, putting his hand on mine. But someone is spreading this, and we both know who. It was like watching a slow leak flood an entire house. At every turn, Sophie was there, twisting facts, planting seeds of doubt, painting me as fragile, desperate, unstable. She never said my name, but the clues she left were like neon arrows. When we attended a mutual friend's baby shower, it became undeniable. I was chatting with a few people I hadn't seen in years when one of them, Angela, smiled too sweetly and said, "So how's everything going? I mean, really going. We all worry about you sometimes." I frowned. "Why would you worry?" She hesitated. "Oh, Sophie mentioned how you've been struggling. She said you put on a brave face, but behind the scenes, it's been really hard. She just cares about you so much, Elena. She talks about you all the time." I forced a smile, but inside my chest was collapsing. Sophie didn't just paint me as weak. She painted herself as the caring savior, the one who loved me despite all my flaws. She was turning my life into her stage play, and she was the heroine while I was cast as the pitiful supporting act. After that, the humiliation escalated. At social events, I'd catch people glancing at me with pity, like they knew some tragic secret. At work, colleagues second guessed me, subtly questioning whether I could handle the pressure. Even my parents, sweet and trusting, asked one evening, "Elena, are you sure you're not working too much?" Sophie said she's worried you're burning out. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Sophie had wormed her way so deeply into my life that even my own parents believed her over me. The final straw came one Friday night. Sophie had invited Michael and me over for dinner with a group of friends. I didn't want to go, but Michael said gently, "If we don't show up, she'll spin that too. Let's just see what happens." Her house was immaculate, as always, soft music, candlelight, expensive wine. At first, things seemed normal, but as the evening went on, Sophie's barbs began again, each one sharper than the last. "Elena," she said with a laugh, "remember when you cried for 2 weeks because you missed out on that fellowship? We had to practically drag her out of bed." The table laughed. My cheeks burned. "And Michael," she added, sipping her wine, "you're a saint, really. Not everyone could put up with her constant dramatics." Michael's jaw tightened. I wanted to scream, but I sat frozen, my hands digging crescents into my knees under the table. Then Sophie leaned in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "But hey, that's why we love her, right? She makes life interesting, even if it's always a little tragic." Lauder again. My ears roared. In that moment, I saw it clearly. This wasn't carelessness. This wasn't thoughtless joking. This was deliberate. Sophie enjoyed humiliating me. She enjoyed turning me into the butt of every joke, the cautionary tale, the sad friend who couldn't quite keep up. And as everyone laughed, she looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the flicker of triumph in her eyes. That was when I realized she wanted me small. She wanted me dependent. She wanted me to stay the underdog, so she could always be the hero. But that night, something inside me hardened. I smiled. For the first time all evening, I forced a smile so calm it startled even Sophie. She tilted her head, slightly confused. Because in that moment, I knew if Sophie wanted to write the story of my life, she was about to find out what it felt like when the story turned against her. The escalation was complete. I wasn't just humiliated, I was ready. I didn't say it out loud yet, but in my heart, a single sentence repeated over and over like a vow: enough is enough. When I woke up the morning after Sophie's dinner party, my body felt heavy, like I'd run a marathon in my sleep. My head still rang with the sound of laughter, her laughter, and the pitying eyes of people who didn't even know the truth. I stared at the ceiling, at the faint cracks in the plaster, and whispered to myself, "Enough." Michael rolled over, his hand brushing my arm. "You didn't sleep," he murmured. "Couldn't," I admitted. My voice sounded foreign, hollow. It's like her words are still echoing inside me. I can't shut them off. He propped himself up on one elbow, studying me. "Then we don't let her echo anymore. Elena, you've been trying to protect this friendship long after she stopped being your friend. It's time to stop letting her narrate your life." The way he said it, calm, steady, certain, planted a seed inside me. I had been reacting, trying to explain, trying to defend myself. But what if I stopped playing defense? What if I went on offense and made Sophie taste the humiliation she so carefully fed me? That thought scared me, but it also thrilled me. For days, I sat with it quietly. On the train to work, in line at the grocery store, while folding laundry, the idea whispered in the back of my mind, take back the story. Turn the stage lights on her. It started with small steps. I dug through my old folders, my emails, my text messages. I started building what Michael called receipts. There it was in black and white, the draft sheet edited, by stripping away my strongest points. The screenshots where she'd publicly joked about me while cloaking it as affection. The podcast clips where her nameless friend sounded exactly like me, down to details only Sophie could have known. And then there was the money. I pulled up the transfer receipts from when I'd lent her money during her rough patch, thousands of dollars, which she had never repaid. Back then, I hadn't minded. She was my best friend, my sister. But now, seeing it laid bare in numbers, I realized it was part of the same pattern. She took and I gave. She used and I justified. I began keeping a private journal of every humiliation, not to wallow, but to catalog. Michael called it my case file. At first, writing them down hurt, but after a while, it felt strangely empowering. Each entry wasn't just pain, it was evidence. Still, evidence wasn't enough. If I wanted real revenge, the kind that would expose her lies to everyone, I needed a plan. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Sophie announced she was hosting a networking gala for a consultancy. She sent me a text like it was a casual invitation. Big event. Launching my new brand initiative. You have to come, L. Everyone will be there. Can't do it without my best friend, Ba. I stared at the message for a long time. My chest tightened, remembering all the times I had been her prop, the loyal friend standing beside her as she dazzled a room. But this time I felt something different, resolve. Michael, I said that evening, this is it. This is where I turn the tables. He raised an eyebrow. How? She's built her whole image on being flawless. The perfect consultant, the perfect friend, the perfect host. But I know her cracks. I know the lies she tells, the debts she hides, the masks she wears. If I can show people the truth, not by attacking, but by letting her reveal herself, she'll crumble. Michael studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right, but you do this smart, Elena. No yelling matches, no losing your cool. You want her undone by her own hands. That became my mantra, undone by her own hands. I started by reaching out quietly to others who had felt Sophie's sting. Priya, who had once confided to me that Sophie turned her nonprofit struggles into content without permission. Jordan, who had seen Sophie spin his film ideas into cocktail anecdotes like they were hers. Even Naomi, who had taught beside Sophie at a workshop once and later confessed, she made me feel like her assistant, not her peer. They all had stories, small stories maybe, but when woven together, they formed a pattern of Sophie using people as props, then discarding them when they no longer fit her narrative. Are you saying you want to go public? Priya asked cautiously one afternoon as we sat in a cafe. Not yet, I said. Not in anger. Not in gossip. I want the truth to come out where she can't control it, where her own words expose her. Priya nodded slowly. You've always played fair, but maybe it's time she learned what fairness really looks like. Meanwhile, Sophie kept calling, texting, inviting me to lunches, brunches, meetings. I kept my replies short but polite. I wanted her to believe I was still her loyal Elena. The more she underestimated me, the better. In private, I prepared. I organized my receipts into folders: career, money, rumors, public persona. I printed copies. I backed everything up to a cloud. I practiced my composure in the mirror, rehearsing the moment when Sophie would try to humiliate me again, and instead, I would be the one smiling calmly while the truth unraveled her. The night of the gala arrived like the final scene of a play. The venue was glamorous: chandeliers, champagne fountains, music drifting through the air like smoke. Guests in shimmering dresses and sharp suits filled the room, laughing, clinking glasses, basking in Sophie's carefully curated world. And there she was, at the center of it all. Sophie, glowing in a silk gown, her hair styled to perfection, her smile as dazzling as ever. When she saw me, she shrieked dramatically, pulling me into a hug. Elena, my sister, I'm so glad you came. Everyone, this is my best friend, my rock, the woman who has been with me through everything. Applause rippled through the crowd. I smiled politely, my heart steady, my hands calm. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking under her spotlight. I was waiting for my cue. Throughout the evening, she played her role, shaking hands, delivering speeches, dropping witty remarks. And as always, she couldn't resist her favorite game, belittling me in front of others. At one point, she laughed loudly, clinking her glass. Elena has the funniest habit. She always thinks her little articles are earth-shattering. Isn't that adorable? She's like my personal dramatist. The crowd chuckled politely. Sophie grinned at me, expecting the usual forced laugh. But instead, I just smiled back, calm, poised, unbothered. That unsettled her. I saw it in her eyes. For the first time, Sophie wasn't sure if she was in control of the script. And that was when I knew the turning point had come. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my voice, about showing everyone that Sophie wasn't the heroine she pretended to be. She was the liar, the manipulator, the puppeteer, and soon her strings would tangle around her own neck. As the night went on, I waited patiently. I knew the moment would come, the moment Sophie would push too far, make one jab too many, and open the door for me to strike back. And when it did, I would be ready, because I wasn't the weak, pitiful friend anymore. I wasn't her character in a story she wrote. I was the author now. And Sophie was about to become the villain in her own tale. The moment finally came, not with thunder or fireworks, but with Sophie's voice, sharp and dripping in the same poison she'd always disguised as humor. Elena. She called from across the gala hall, her glass raised high, her smile gleaming under the chandelier. Come up here for a moment. Everyone needs to meet the woman who keeps me grounded. Even when she makes life a little too dramatic, the crowd chuckled. I felt every eye in the room turn toward me. Once, this would have been the moment where my cheeks burned, where I forced laughter through clenched teeth. But not tonight. Tonight, my pulse was steady. Tonight, I was ready. I walked to the stage slowly, each step deliberate, the click of my heels like a drumbeat announcing what was about to come. Sophie threw an arm around me as if she were presenting her prize. This woman, she told the crowd, is my best friend. We've been through everything together. She's the reason I am who I am today. It sounded generous, but her eyes flickered sideways to me, daring me to squirm as she added, of course she wouldn't survive without me either. I've carried her through so many meltdowns. Right, Elle? The laughter that followed was shallow, uneasy. Some of the crowd smiled politely, others shifted uncomfortably. Sophie didn't notice. She was basking in her own performance, and that was when I took the microphone from her hand. Thank you, Sophie. I said, my voice calm, steady, louder than I felt. It's true. We've been friends for a long time. We've shared so many memories. Laughter, tears, late nights, trust. The room hushed. Sophie blinked, surprised by my tone. And that's why it's so painful, I continued, to realize that trust can be the sharpest weapon in the wrong hands. A ripple went through the crowd. Sophie gave a nervous laugh, reaching for the mic. Okay, Elle, that's enough wine for you. But I stepped back, my grip firm. No, Sophie. Tonight, I'm not the punchline. Tonight, I get to tell the truth. The silence was heavy now. People leaned in, curiosity sparking in their eyes. Sophie's smile faltered. I pulled a small folder from my purse, my carefully prepared case file. I opened it slowly, deliberately. For years, I said, I believed Sophie was my sister, my confidant. But behind my back, she was telling a different story. On her podcast, she described me as a weak friend who fabricated struggles to look heroic. At dinners, she mocked me as unstable, a burden. And in private, she took my kindness and turned it into ammunition. Gasps rippled through the room. Sophie's face drained of color. Elena, stop. Here, I interrupted, holding up a printed transcript. Episode 14 of her podcast. Her words, some friends create scarcity to make themselves feel special. They love being the underdog. She was talking about me. And everyone in this room who knows us knows it. The crowd shifted. Murmurs buzzed like bees. I turned another page. Here are the receipts from when I lent Sophie thousands of dollars during her rough patch. She never paid me back. But she went on to buy this house, this gown, this image, while painting me as the struggling friend who couldn't survive without her. Sophie's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to laugh with her. But no one did. And here, I said, my voice trembling now not from fear but from righteous fury, or emails where Sophie edited my fellowship application. She called my truth performative and deleted the very lines that gave my work power. I thought she was helping me, but now I see she was silencing me, keeping me small so she could shine brighter. Someone in the crowd whispered, oh my God. Sophie finally snapped, her voice high pitched and panicked. You're twisting everything. You don't understand. I was helping you. I've always helped you. I looked at her, my gaze steady. No, Sophie, you weren't helping me. You were rewriting me. You made me your character, your supporting act. And now everyone gets to see the real script. I handed the microphone back to her. My voice softened, but it carried across the hall. Go ahead. Keep talking. Let's hear your version, because tonight I don't need to fight. Tonight, your lies are already louder than I could ever be. For the first time in all the years I'd known her, Sophie was speechless. The silence stretched, thick and damning. Guests shifted uncomfortably. A few people stepped away from her. I saw Priya in the back, her eyes shining with quiet pride. Michael stood near the bar, his arms folded, his expression fierce and protective. Sophie's hand shook as she tried to smile. She's exaggerating. She's always been like this, so dramatic. But no one laughed, not this time. One woman, Angela, the same one who'd pitied me at the baby shower, spoke up. Is it true, Sophie? Did you really do all that? Sophie stammered, her face paling. It was for entertainment. People like stories. I never meant. But the words crumbled in her mouth. The mask was slipping, and everyone could see it. I didn't need to say anything else. I simply walked off the stage, my head high, my heart pounding with release. As I passed through the crowd, people's eyes followed me, not with pity, but with something else. Respect, sympathy, understanding. Behind me, Sophie's voice cracked, trying to regain control. You're all misunderstanding. Elena knows I love her. She knows I've always. But the whispers drowned her out. By the time Michael's hand found mine and we stepped out into the night air, I felt lighter than I had in years. The cool breeze hit my face, and for the first time I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel like Sophie's shadow. I felt like myself. Inside, Sophie's world was collapsing. I didn't have to twist the knife. She was doing it all on her own. Her lies, her manipulation, her masks, they were unraveling in front of the very audience she'd worked so hard to impress. And me. I was finally free. The revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was simple, precise, undeniable. I let Sophie expose herself. And in the end, that was the sweetest revenge of all. The night of the gala lingered in my memory like a thunderclap, loud, impossible to ignore, and leaving behind a silence that felt both terrifying and liberating. When Michael and I stepped outside, I could still hear Sophie's frantic voice echoing through the hall, her words dissolving under the weight of disbelief. For the first time in years, the power dynamic had shifted. I wasn't her shadow anymore. I was the light she couldn't dim. But revenge, I quickly learned, doesn't end the moment the crowd gasps. Revenge has ripples. The first ripple came the very next morning. I woke to a flood of messages, texts, voicemails, emails. Some from mutual friends, some from acquaintances, even a few from colleagues. Elena, I had no idea. I'm so sorry you went through that. You were so brave last night. I've always felt Sophie wasn't as kind as she seemed. I cut ties with her years ago for the same reason. She used me too. Each message was like a stone being lifted off my chest. People had seen it. They'd noticed the way she undermined me, the little digs, the false sweetness. They just hadn't spoken up. Maybe because they didn't know how, maybe because Sophie's charm blinded them. But once the truth was out in the open, the dam broke. Even Priya called me that morning, her voice warm. You know, Elena, you didn't just free yourself. You freed everyone she's ever done this to. We were all too polite to say it out loud, but you did. You ended her act. Still, part of me worried. Sophie wasn't the type to bow out quietly. She thrived on control, on shaping narratives. I half expected her to spin the gala disaster into some sob story, that she'd been misunderstood or worse, that I was the villain. And she tried. A few days later, Sophie released a special episode of her podcast. I listened sitting in my kitchen, my phone on speaker, Michael beside me. Her voice was shakier than usual, but she still tried to sound confident. Friends, sometimes, the people we love most lash out at us. Sometimes they project their insecurities, and we become the scapegoat. I've always tried to help those around me, to lift them up. But last night, one of my closest friends used my generosity against me. I almost laughed at the audacity. She wasn't apologizing. She was doubling down, painting herself as the victim. But the comments section told a different story. This doesn't match what people saw at the gala. Stop gaslighting. Sophie, we were there. If you lift people up, why do they always walk away broken? The tide had turned and Sophie couldn't stop it. By the end of the week, Several of her sponsors had quietly cut ties. Her consultancy lost clients. And friends she had once charmed began to distance themselves. The glittering world she had built on manipulation was crumbling, one piece at a time. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Watching Sophie's empire collapse under the weight of her own lies was enough. One evening, about a month later, I got a text from her. Just one sentence. I never thought you'd betray me like this. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back. I didn't betray you, Sophie. I just stopped protecting you from the truth. She never replied. And just like that silence, it was strange at first adjusting to life without her voice in my ear. For so long, Sophie had been a constant, whether lifting me up, cutting me down, or weaving herself into every corner of my life. Without her, there was a gap. But slowly, I realized that gap wasn't emptiness. It was space, space for peace, space for growth, space for me. Michael noticed it too. One evening, as we sat in our tiny kitchen with takeout containers between us, he smiled. You seem lighter, Elle. Like you can finally breathe. I nodded. Because I can. For the first time in years, I feel like my life belongs to me again. My career blossomed in ways I hadn't expected. Without Sophie's shadow, without the constant second guessing, I wrote with more clarity, more confidence. My stories gained traction, not because I was fighting to prove myself, but because I was finally free to speak in my own voice. My editor even nominated one of my pieces for an award, a recognition that would have once terrified me, but now filled me with quiet pride. At family gatherings, my parents beamed at me, no longer carrying Sophie's whispered worries in their minds. My mother hugged me one evening and said, I don't know what happened between you two, but I can see you're stronger now, and I'm proud of you. That meant everything. As for Sophie, she faded. Not overnight, her kind rarely do. But piece by piece, her mask cracked. People stopped laughing at her jokes. They stopped believing her stories. And without an audience, Sophie was just another person desperate for attention she no longer deserved. One day, I passed her on the street. She was dressed impeccably, as always, but there was something brittle in her smile. She froze when she saw me. For a moment, I thought she might say something. An apology, an accusation, anything. But she didn't. She just lowered her gaze and walked past, her heels clicking too fast on the pavement. And that was when I knew I had won. Not because she was ruined, but because she no longer had power over me. Revenge had given me closure, yes. But more importantly, it had given me back my voice. In the quiet moments now, when I sit at my desk with a cup of coffee and an open document, I sometimes think back to the girl I was when I met Sophie, the one who thought friendship meant shelter, who pinned her name tag on crooked and followed someone else's map. I want to reach back through time and tell her, don't be afraid. You'll learn to draw your own map. And one day, you'll realize you never needed her to tell your story. You were the author all along, because that's the truth about revenge. It isn't just about making them pay. It's about reclaiming the part of yourself they tried to steal. And in the end, Sophie lost the only thing she truly wanted: control. But me, I gained something far greater. I gained freedom.